Welcome back to Levity Books. My name is Liam, and I hope you've been reading well. So three things have happened. I just about finished The Miracle Worker. I didn't really start The Rhinoceros by Eugene Ionesco, and I've been struggling through Proust's Swann's Way. So I didn't know that The Miracle Worker by William Gibson was based on a real story until after I read it, had my impressions and written the review. And I think this is precisely why the play is overrated on Goodreads. It is one of the highest rated plays I've ever seen. So if you didn't know already, The Miracle Worker is a story about a deafblind girl called Helen Keller who is taught how to speak by a persevering young teacher called Anne Sullivan against all odds. There's a family which really doesn't help Helen, and it's just talking about how we change the way we see people who don't fit in with society, how quickly they can resurface and show potential. And so the play has a great, amazing message for that reason. It's very historically inspiring to people, but as a play, it's just not that engaging or entertaining or just well constructed. It's three acts that just didn't have to happen. There were loads of little things that bothered me about this play. There's full pages of stage directions of people just wrestling with Helen. There's just physical exchanges. There's basically no quotable part to this play. There's no big quotes here. There's no interesting use of dialogue, which is what plays are for. There's no dramatic tension, which is what the audience is waiting for. There's no real suspense here. I think from the beginning you can tell that something's good that's going to happen. You can tell that they're going to succeed in teaching her, but there's a specific point in the play where I think all its merit just goes, like the balloon was popped. There's a point at which the family say, well, if Anne can't teach Helen how to speak, we're going to have to send Helen to the asylum. And that's the ultimatum. That's like suddenly there's this thing in the play, like, will Helen learn how to speak or will she be doomed? And suddenly the audience has to think about this. But this happens in the last act, quite like just before the climax of the play. So this is like right towards the end of the play, this is raised. So finally we have something to kind of look into, because up until now it's just been Anne trying to teach Helen, like that's the whole plot. But then Anne Sullivan says the asylums weren't so bad, I grew up in them, and it just destroys the play, because we come away from this thinking, oh well, if Helen goes to the asylum she'll be fine because she'll persevere like Anne, and she can, and if Anne teaches her how to talk then that's also fine because then she won't go to the asylum. So I'm just there thinking, what am I meant to be rooting for when I'm reading this play? I can tell what's going to happen, and if it doesn't happen, it doesn't matter. But at the same time, I'm not going through a rigorous analysis of this play. I've given the play back to my library, but also it's so inspiring to so many people, and so many people like it. It's kind of besides the point for me to pick it apart, and it's an adaptation of an already brilliant story, but it just bothers me that William Gibson will get the Tony Award for being the playwright for this really mediocre adaptation, and that the ratings for this play are so high when you'll have things like Shakespeare coming in lower because Shakespeare's given to people who don't want to read him, whereas The Miracle Worker is given to people who want to see a optimistic and happy play for once, and there aren't too many happy plays, so in that realm this is actually probably why people like it. So the next thing is Eugene Ionesco's plays. So I gave up on The Rhinoceros very quickly because it starts with two men in a cafe talking, and suddenly they see a rhinoceros running down the street, and it's presented in a very comedic, absurd way, like slapstick, like there's a rhinoceros, like how did that happen? And I'm just not really in the mood for something that's kind of very silly right now. I want to read quite serious books for the moment. Although it's summer, I mean it's normally a good time for it, but like I just instantly could not engage with the humor. It felt like it was trying hard to be quite funny and absurd and just unpredictable, and I just didn't have time for it. So I might go back to it, but I think Ionesco does come across as a bit pedantic and academic, so I don't know if it's that appealing generally, outside of the fact that he uses some nice techniques. And finally, let's talk about Proust. This is what I've been reading this week and maybe the week before. So there's a fourth volume I've ordered, which hasn't come through yet. And this is In Search of Lost Time. I've been reading Swann's Way, and as you can see, I'm about halfway through Swann's Way. There's also the first half of the second book in here too. So I've got to get to about here. And so far, I really like it in one way, but I really struggle with it in another. And I've realized that my 2021 goal for trying to finish In Search of Lost Time in one go, look, I could do it, but it would be painful and unhelpful, and it would be wasting the experience, I think. I feel like this is a book that needs to be processed in very slow amounts of time, and I need to go back and reflect on it. But also, the writing style is very, it reads like a personal diary, and so it's got this very reflective tone. I'll talk more about it in the future, but it's hard to read. It's hard to read in one go. It keeps putting me to sleep, like Kafka did, but for a different reason. So yeah, I've been liking it, but I don't think I can finish In Search of Lost Time this year. I think I'm going to just finish Swann's Way, but I have a couple of projects lined up that I'll start in a few weeks that I think will be much more engaging for me as a reader and also for you as an audience, because this takes a long time to get through, and it's not something that should be rushed for the sake of reaching a deadline, or just saying that you've done it. I feel like it's something you need to really take your time with, otherwise there's just no point. You just kind of skim reading, and it's just not being absorbed in the way that I think it should be. So yeah, it's been a week, 2 weeks of pretty bad reading, but I think it's gonna go up in a week or so because I have some interesting projects which probably my next video will be about. But yeah, follow me on Instagram or Twitter or some of the other things. I'm on Goodreads as well. You'll see some of what I've got lined up in the future. Anyways, that's it for now, and happy reading.